Hi, this is Joseph. Today is Thursday. It is March 21st. This is a chat room update. So today I've only had one trade in the chat room. So as interesting as that might seem for some people, anyway, just to give you an idea, if you're considering joining my chat room, I trade accounts like my Apex account and other accounts that are very with companies that are very similar to Apex. One of the reasons that I really like Apex is that they allow you to control up to 20 accounts per client. You would need to use a trade copier, make sure that you have a computer that can handle that, but they provide the trade copier. I think it's $150, and it's set up so that you can connect all 20 of your Apex accounts. Now, in the chat room, I'm just trading the S&P. It's a, in my opinion, it's a really good place to start. I know the Nasdaq's great. I know the Dow's great. All of it is. I mean, there's nothing wrong with any of those. It's just that the S&P is where I focus. I find that for a lot of people in the beginning stages of getting used to trading futures or, testing out other funding companies with, if you're going to consider trading anything other than Forex, S&P, in my opinion, is a really good place to start. That's all I've got to say. And I'm a little biased because that's when I opened up my very first trading account back in 2000. I traded the S&P. I actually had an account with PFG. Was it PFG? PFG. Yeah, they went out of business. You probably remember a long, long time ago, the owner had some problems and all kinds of things. It was all over the news. But anyway, um, so that's what we're trading today here in the chat room. And I speak out everything that I'm thinking. And as I find the opportunity that's going to give me the best trade, in my opinion, for the whole day, that's all I'm looking for. Sometimes that best trade setup will occur one time for the whole day, and other times it'll be three times in a day or two times, and sometimes it'll even be five times in a day. It just depends on the day. I can't, no one can predict it. You can look at the charts and different time frames, and you can kind of assess the possibilities, especially when you look for catalysts, right? So what could be catalysts, specific or major levels, and even economic data, like those could all be an opportunity, and you never really know until it happens. So that's all I'm doing. So I'll walk you through what I did in the chat room today. This blue circle right here is the first 5 minute bar right at 9:30 New York time when the market opens. And every day I highlight the high and the low of that 5 minute bar. That's what you see with these pink lines. Now, I never know what's going to happen, right? You don't know, but I'm paying attention to the behavior as a result of that range. Sometimes that range is significant, other times it's not. And next you see is a red diamond. That's bar number 6. And one of the things that I say, and I'm not the only one, a lot of people are well aware of this. You can look at the data in your stats if you track your data, like with a program like TraderView. One of the things you'll find is that if you struggle and you find at certain times or certain hours of the day that you may find that you tend to experience more losing trades at, at certain times. And you'll only know this if you collect the data, if you can actually look at it. So again, TraderView is a great place to start, and it's going to take some time for you to acquire this data. But when you have enough of it, you can determine, hey, I might lose. You may think to yourself, I might lose or find a majority of my losing positions develop between when the market opens, which is bar number 1 at that blue circle, between bar number 1 and bar number 6. So for the first 30 minutes, when the market opens, this is a 5 minute chart, by the way, for the first 30 minutes, you may find that that's when you experience most of your losing trades. That's what I went through. So I found that shortly after that, I ended up having to spend some time making up those losses. And I'm not the only person who does that, like, or went through that. So I quickly, after looking at the data, thought, okay, well, I'll just wait until after bar 6, after the first 30 minutes. So that's 10 o'clock New York time. And then I did that for a week. Within the first week of switching that and just saying I'm not going to execute any trades until after bar 6, then I'll start looking for trades. I found in the first week a noticeable improvement already. Like it was that dramatic. And it slowed things down for me. Now, obviously, once you get that down, then you can start looking for opportunities to trade before bar number 6 or before bar number 1, because there are opportunities sometimes. But don't do that if you're not ready for it, is what I'm getting at. So if you find that you're still struggling, slow things down. This may be something that would help. Now, if you notice by bar 6, I didn't have any trades. All I saw was that price spiked the highs, they swept the lows of that first minute, that first bar number 1 on the 5-minute chart, and I could see that we were probably going to create some kind of trading range. That's all. I had a high up there on bar number, what is that? Bar number 3, and then we have bar number 4, and everything just goes sideways from that point on. This square, this red square right there, that's bar number 18. Now, bar number 18 is another bar that sometimes gives me opportunities and sometimes it does not. And other days, it's just sort of like a measurement. It's sort of like a landmark in a way. Like where's bar number 18 and what has price been doing around that level? And other times, other days, it's not even significant at all. And that's what you'll find about trading. So I pay attention. I know these patterns. I'm aware of the patterns. I'm looking for the patterns. I know what kind of trading range we're in. That's the trade. That's what's going on for the day. It's not a breakout trend day to the upside or to the downside. It's just a trading range at this point. Now, the next thing I would need to do is pay attention to the size of that trading range. What's the size, the high and the low? How many points is that on the S&P? So then we start going over here to this spike high, and I could see that it was just sort of a little blow off move and it was probably going to reverse. Now, I don't take the first reversal. Sometimes I do if it happens to close on a 15-minute chart and everything is just perfect. You can see that I also use a 20-day moving average in here, and that bar on the 5-minute chart had not closed below. It's not the only thing that I need. That's not the only form of confirmation. I'm just looking at it again as a measurement. That's all that it is to me. These indicators I just use as tools. They're just measurements. They're just guides, but they're not the signal itself. That's what I want you to first of all know, that I'm not trading off of indicators exclusively. It's what's going on here in the price action, the activity, and the bars themselves that are actually giving me a trigger. So then you see a move right here, and right where I'm moving my cursor, there's a blue line. Please don't be confused by the blue line right up there at the very top with that blow off move. That I was just highlighting, the number of times that it was making an attempt to go higher. That's all that it was. I was just kind of creating that wedge sort of pattern right up there. And then I get this pullback. And then this black bar right here where I'm moving my cursor, you can see that there's a couple of lines that are pointing at it. That is the first trigger bar. Now, you've heard me say in some of my videos, if you've watched some of the previous ones, that the first trigger bar, I may not enter on that first trigger bar because I do expect a pullback, and I would rather not sit through the pullback. There wasn't anything significant happening here on that bar other than just sort of a, hey, sit up and pay attention to me. That was the kind of bar that this was. It was just a trigger bar, and I sat up and paid attention. And I say often, and I say this in the chat room, now I'm going to look for a second entry. In other words, a second trigger that is similar to the first trigger after the pullback. And that happened right here. Here's the pullback, and there is the next bar. So this is like that clamp down bar. Now, it's not my typical clamp down bar. Normally, I like to see them close at the low of the bar itself. But this was actually closing below the first 5-minute bar range. It closed below the first trigger bar. The first trigger bar was like the clamp down bar, and it closed at the lows, and it sort of wiped out all of these bars over here on the left. There's like 9 or 10 bars, maybe 12 bars over here on the left. So that was my first trigger. I just knew the pattern that it typically will pull back, and I'll wait for the second pattern. Here it is. So then I wait until it starts to take out the lows right here, and then I sat through this little pullback right here. I'm watching what it's doing. It's sort of hugging that 20-day moving average. It's not perfect, but it's just a visual clue that everything's okay. There's nothing wrong. I know where my stop is, and I know where my target is. So I'm looking initially for a 5.25 point target every time I take a trade like this. And just about every time, if I wait for that one perfect trade, and I'm not trying to trade all of this chop inside of here over here to the left, if I wait for that one perfect signal and that one perfect opportunity, it requires a lot of sitting on your hands. It's going to work if I'm patient and I've done everything that I possibly can to make sure that I'm in the right trade, that one best perfect trade, that 90-10 trade. it's going to go to that 5.25 point target. So you can see that it's a slower day and it took quite a while. Down here was where it hit that 5.25 point target, right here at that where with this bar with that blue line pointing right at it. That's the 5.25 point target. But it didn't look like it was done. So we sat through the pullback right here and we watched this bar then close below that bar number 4, which was this morning's low. It took this morning after the market opened, is what I should say. It closed below that low. So then we sort of sat through this little pullback right here, which I didn't really like, but we did. And it dropped down one more time to that moving average. Now this moving average right here, in case you're wondering, it's the same moving average that appears on the 1 hour time frame, but I throw it here on the 5 minute chart so that I can see it and I use it as a target. So that's where we closed out the trade for 11 points. I didn't like sitting through this pullback. So I did mention that if anybody was trying to mimic my trades in the chat room, and again, I just call out the trades that I'm taking. I'm not telling anybody in the chat room that they need to take this trade. That's up to you. If you trust me enough and you sit in my chat room long enough to be able to see that I can pretty much repeat my performance day after day successfully, I'm not saying that I'm never going to have a loss. I'm not saying that at all. And again, the other truth is that my performance to this moment does not guarantee that my future performance is going to be the exact same. So you need to be aware of that too. I mean, that's just the reality of trading. But if you trust the pattern and you're starting to understand, and I teach everything that I'm doing, I break it all down. I teach my system in the chat room. So if you trust it, you could potentially sit through this. So I talk about knowing and understanding and studying the counter or the retracements in a trend, the counter trend movements and the retracements in a trend. This is a trend. This is a trend that you see unfolding here, each bar by bar by bar, and then we get a couple of pullbacks. And these retracement bars were not enough for me to justify or say with 100% certainty that this trend to the downside is completely over with. Like that, I didn't see that. That information wasn't there. And I know that because I've studied this, not just because I'm looking at, 2 bars and then, a flat sideways bar and then 1 bar and then the resumption of that trend right there on that engulfing bar. So, or somewhat engulfing, at least it closed below the lows. But you get the point. You study it long enough and you start to understand the patterns and you start to understand what you're doing here. So this trade paid 11 points. It very well could have been that it stalled right here at the 5.25 point target and then created some activity that I would have assumed, well, okay, it's starting to look like we're done here. So let's just take the 5.25 at that point. That's what I'm doing. And so I tell everybody exactly what I'm doing. On some days, I'll just take the 5.25, even if it continues, and I'll tell everybody exactly what I'm doing. But today, it looked like it was probably going to pull back like this and then resume. I was looking at the larger time frames. That's where I was taking most of my cues. And then, of course, that the moving average right here, which is the 20-day EMA on the 1 hour chart, but I set it up so that it'll appear here on the 5 minute chart. That's all that is. And I usually use that as a target as well. That's it. And then at this point, I start to see that in most cases, it'll start to go sideways. It just kind of oscillates going back and forth. We see some of these bars creating wicks on both the top and the bottom, and then I'm done. I'm out of the trade. That's it. So I only had one trade. So I stress that, and I say that because it may seem boring to some people, but this is what I do every day. I just look for that one perfect trade, and in my ebook, and you can download it from my website. In my ebook, I wrote that ebook, 10 Ticks to 80K. And again, that's based on the idea and the concept that Apex put out back in December. It only takes 10 ticks a day to make $80,000 a month if you purchase 20 $50,000 accounts. I'm not telling anybody to buy 20 $50,000 accounts. What I'm saying is it was a promotion that Apex put out back in December. And I thought it was pretty interesting. So I went out and said, okay, I'm going to go ahead and do that. And then I'm going to write about it. And I'm going to tell everybody how I set myself up for the mindset, making sure that I was prepared so that I could study these patterns every day and be more effective with my studies and the way I organize and categorize my information. What I mean by that is very often you'll find that you'll take screenshots of your charts You might even mark them up and you'll put them in a folder or you'll put them on your computer somewhere, but you don't go back and revisit them. So it's like a missed opportunity to study that pattern and that trade over and over and over again. So in that 10 ticks to 80K ebook, that report that you can download from my website, I talk about how to maximize the most effective use of your time when you're studying. I realized that I even had poor study habits. Like I needed to improve all that. And it never occurred to me in the beginning of my trading career that study habits, effective study habits, would help me get to successful levels of trading much faster in half the time when I look back at my trading career. And it would have cost me half the amount of money and the losses that I had just by putting and implementing those things. So that's what that book is about. It's about setting yourself up before you even jump in to start trading. And then, of course, I talk about my trading strategy and how I used all of these little components to be more effective if I was going to go after 20, if anybody was going to go after 20, $50,000 accounts. Well, you want to make sure you get those payouts, right? You want to make sure that you're capable of doing that. So again, I'm not telling anybody to do that, but it's a fantastic opportunity if you're willing to put in the time. Put in the time first. Once you know you're ready, then go out and get those accounts because that's what's out there available to you. I've often said that whatever number you want to make $100,000 a year, you want to make $1 million a year. The market has your money. The market's not going to keep it from you. The only person that's going to keep it from you is you. And you have to figure out where your weaknesses are. Some of my weaknesses, I had no idea. I thought it was like reading candlesticks, right? I thought, how do I improve? Maybe I need a better indicator. As it turns out, I just needed to improve my study habits and my ability to focus when I do study and how I organize and categorize all of my information so that I can retrieve that in the heat of the moment quickly and so that I can compare it to what I'm looking at today so I can say, there it is. I know this pattern. And I do that over and over and over and over again, month after month after month after year after year. That's what it takes. And never giving up. Like do this every day, 7 days a week. It makes it the process of studying much more easier if you have a organized system to study and categorize all of the information in your notes. It makes it fun. It makes it a lot more easier and you get more value out of it. So download that ebook, 10 ticks to 80K, and it explains how to set that up. And I've got some videos on a 5-day challenge, trader challenge, that also walks you through how I put all that together and how I tag everything. And it's great. Like you need to do that to be able to get effective use of your time. But this is what I do every day. I trade my accounts. I trade Apex accounts. I trade other accounts that are similar to Apex. I say Apex because number one, I like it. I like the fact that I can have 20 accounts. I have 20 accounts, and um, I mention Apex because they do such a great job at promoting themselves. I think everybody's pretty familiar with them by now. Some people they kind of said I get the feedback and they say I've heard about it, but I didn't know too much about it. So jump into the chat room. We talk about it. I talk about it every day. Um, and this is what I do. I just call out my trades and I explain exactly what I'm doing and why I'm closing out the trades. And after a while, you'll start to get the hang of it. I also talk about how I organize my time. So everything that I talk about in that ebook and much, much more, the 10 ticks to 80K, I talk about how I structure my business, how I operate. So thank you very much. If you want to consider joining, there's a link either in my profile of my YouTube channel or below in the description. And again, I recommend starting off with downloading the ebook. Download the ebook, read it. If it makes sense, then maybe consider watching some of my videos on my YouTube channel, see if that makes sense. And then from there, you can start to make a more better educated decision if you want to get it in the chat room, if it seems like it's something that you want to spend any time in. Thanks for watching.